The Ocmulgee River moved like black oil through the Georgia wilderness in the autumn of 1844, carrying secrets in its current and burying them in the mud of its banks. The swamps that flanked it were older than any white settlement, older than the cotton economy that now bled the land dry, older even than the memory of the Cherokee who once called this valley sacred ground. Aiyana knew every sound the swamp made. She knew the difference between a heron's cry and a man's last breath. She knew which shadows moved with the wind and which moved against it. She had learned these things in the 6 years since the soldiers came, since they forced her people onto the roads that led west, since she watched her mother collapse in the mud of what they now called the Trail of Tears. She had been 22 then, young enough to run, old enough to know that running sometimes meant surviving alone. The cabin she built sat on a ridge overlooking the river, hidden by a curtain of Spanish moss and cypress trees, so twisted they looked like the bones of giants. It was small, one room, a stone hearth, walls chinked with mud and river clay. Tell me in the comments which country you are from and what you thought of this story. And if this story made an impression on you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future stories. It smelled of wood smoke and the herbs she hung from the rafters, bloodroot, boneset, wild ginger. Remedies her grandmother had taught her, back when remedies mattered, back when there were people left to heal. Tahu lay by the door, a grey shadow larger than any wolf had right to be. His eyes were amber in the firelight, patient and ancient. He had found her, or she had found him, 2 winters ago, starving and half-frozen in a deadfall trap. She freed him, fed him, and he never left. Some nights she wondered if he was entirely animal at all, or if the old spirits her grandmother spoke of could wear fur and fang. She didn't speak to him. She didn't speak to anyone anymore. The last words she had uttered aloud were in Cherokee, a prayer over her mother's body. English felt like swallowing stones. Silence felt like armor. The fog came in thick that October night, rolling off the river like something alive, something searching. Aiyana sat by the fire, grinding dried roots with a smooth stone, when Tahu's head lifted. His ears went forward. A low rumble started deep in his chest. She set down the grinding stone and moved to the window, a gap in the logs covered with oiled cloth. Through it, she could see nothing but white fog and the dark shapes of trees, but she heard it, a splash, downstream, then another, something heavy moving through shallow water. Tahu was on his feet now, hackles raised. Aiyana took her rifle from above the door, a flintlock she'd stolen from a dead surveyor 3 years back, and checked the powder. Then she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped into the night. The fog was cold and wet against her face. It muffled sound, turned the world into a ghost of itself. She moved down the slope toward the river, feet silent on the carpet of pine needles, Tahu a grey wraith at her side. The splashing had stopped. She found him at the river's edge, half in the water, half on the muddy bank. A man, face down, one arm stretched toward the shore, as if he'd been crawling. His shirt was torn open, his back a landscape of old scars, whip marks, thick and raised, crossing each other like the roots of a strangler fig. Fresh blood mixed with the river water, turning the mud around him dark. Tahu approached first, sniffing, then looked back at her. Aiyana knelt. She put her fingers against his neck. His pulse was there, faint, irregular, but there. He was young, maybe 25, his skin dark as the river water, his hair cut close to his scalp. Iron shackles hung from one wrist, the chain broken. His feet were bare and bleeding, a runaway. She had seen them before, passing through the swamps, following the river north. She had left food where they could find it, covered their tracks when she could. But she had never brought one into her home. It was one thing to be invisible, it was another to harbor evidence. But the fog was thick, and the night was cold, and something in the way his hand was stretched toward the shore, like he was reaching for something he'd been promised, made her think of her mother, reaching for water she would never taste. She made her decision. Aiyana grabbed him under the arms and dragged him up the bank. He was heavier than he looked, all muscle and bone, nothing wasted. Tahu helped, gripping the man's torn shirt in his teeth. Together, they hauled him up the slope, through the trees, into the cabin. She laid him on the floor by the fire and began her work. His wounds were many, lash marks reopened and infected, a deep gash on his thigh, blisters on his feet that had burst and bled. She cleaned them with water boiled with white oak bark, applied poultices of comfrey and golden seal, wrapped what she could with strips of cloth torn from an old blanket. He didn't wake, but he breathed. That was enough. It was near dawn when she heard the horses. Tahu heard them first. His head snapped toward the door, a growl rolling through him like distant thunder. Aiyana moved to the window. Through the thinning fog, she could see them. 2 riders, moving slow through the trees, one carrying a torch that guttered in the damp air. Slave catchers. She knew them by the way they moved, by the dogs that ran ahead of them. Bloodhounds, bred for hunting men. They were following the trail to the river. Aiyana looked at the man on her floor. He was still unconscious, his breathing shallow. She couldn't move him. She couldn't hide him. The cabin was one room, and the dogs would smell him the moment they got close. She could let them take him. It would be the smart thing, the safe thing. She could say she found him here, that she was about to report him. They might believe her. They might not. But the scars on his back told a story she knew too well. The story of a life stolen, a body owned, a soul crushed into something that could be bought and sold. She had watched her people marched away in chains. She had seen the treaties broken, the promises turned to ash. She knew what it meant to be treated as less than human, to be something that could be removed when convenient. The riders were closer now. She could hear their voices, low and harsh. Aiyana made her second decision of the night. She took the rifle down from the door and checked the load. Then she stepped outside, Tahu beside her, and waited in the clearing before her cabin. The riders emerged from the trees as the sun began to break through the fog. 2 men, rough-looking, one thin and wiry, with a face like a hatchet, the other thick-bodied and red-faced, sweating despite the cold. The dogs strained at their leashes, noses to the ground. But it was the 3rd man who made her breath catch. He came last, riding a black horse that moved like smoke. He was tall, dressed in a long coat the color of dried blood, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. When he looked up, she saw his eyes. Pale grey, cold as river stones. Silas Reed. She had heard of him. Everyone had. He was the best bounty hunter in Georgia, maybe in all the South. He didn't just catch runaways, he made examples of them. He had a reputation for returning his captures alive, but broken, missing fingers, branded, sometimes blinded. He was a man who understood that fear was more profitable than death. He pulled his horse to a stop 10 feet from her cabin and studied her with those dead eyes. "Morning, squaw," he said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "You seen a nigger pass through here? Big buck, probably bleeding, definitely scared. Trail leads right to your door." Aiyana said nothing. She held the rifle across her chest, not quite pointing at him, not quite lowered. Reed smiled. It didn't touch his eyes. "Now I know you Injuns don't talk much these days. Can't blame you after all the government's done. But this here's business, and business don't care about old grudges." He gestured toward the cabin. "We're gonna search your place. If you got nothing to hide, you got nothing to fear." The dogs were pulling harder now, whining, focused on the cabin door. Tahu's growl deepened. Reed's smile faded. "That wolf of yours gonna be a problem?" Aiyana's fingers tightened on the rifle. She thought of the man inside, unconscious and helpless. She thought of her mother, dying in the mud. She thought of the soldiers who had smiled while they burned Cherokee homes. She thought of all the times she had stayed silent, stayed invisible, stayed alive by being nothing. The sun broke through the fog fully now, turning the river behind her to gold. Reed reached for the pistol at his belt, and Aiyana stepped forward into the light, raised her rifle, and aimed it directly at his heart. The clearing fell silent, except for the nervous shuffle of horses and the low, continuous rumble emanating from Tahu's chest. The two men behind Reed shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward their weapons, but Reed held up one hand, stopping them. "Now that," he said softly, "is a mistake you're making, squaw." Aiyana's aim didn't waver. The rifle was old but well maintained, and at this distance she wouldn't miss. Reed seemed to understand this. His pale eyes studied her face, looking for fear, for hesitation. He found neither. "You got one shot in that flintlock," Reed continued, his voice still gentle, almost conversational. "And there's three of us. Even if you put me down, Cobb and Turner here will fill you so full of holes you'll leak like a sieve. That wolf too. Is that really how you want this to go? Over some runaway nigger who ain't nothing to you?" The man called Cobb, the thin one with the hatchet face, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Just let us search the cabin, Injun. We find him, we take him. You go back to your sad little life. Simple." But it wasn't simple. Aiyana knew that the moment they crossed her threshold, the moment they saw the man on her floor, everything would change. They would take him, yes, but they would also remember her. They would mark her as someone who helped runaways, and men like Reed didn't forget. More than that, and this was the part that surprised her, the part she hadn't expected to feel after 6 years of deliberate numbness. She didn't want them to take him, that man with the scars like a map of suffering, that man who had dragged himself through a river, seeking freedom he might never find. That man deserved better than to be returned to whatever hell had marked his flesh so thoroughly. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, words spoken in Cherokee over a fire long extinguished. "When the world shows you who it is, daughter, you must decide who you will be in response." Reed's hand was still on his pistol, but he hadn't drawn it. He was calculating, she realized, calculating the cost of this confrontation, the time it would take, the possibility that his quarry might escape while they dealt with her. Men like Reed thought in terms of profit and loss, in human commodities and market values. "Tell you what," Reed said, his tone shifting to something that might have passed for reasonable in a different context. "I'm a fair man. I'll pay you. $20 if you tell me where he is. That's more money than you've probably seen in a year. You can buy yourself some real food, maybe some cloth for a new dress. All you got to do is step aside." $20. It was an enormous sum, more than most people earned in months. It was also an insult, the price he was offering for a man's life, for her complicity, for her soul. Tahu had moved forward, positioning himself between Aiyana and the riders. His lips were pulled back now, showing teeth that could crush bone. The bloodhounds whimpered and pulled backward on their leashes, wanting nothing to do with the wolf dog. "Your animals got more sense than you do," Turner, the red-faced one, muttered. He was sweating more heavily now, despite the morning chill. His horse danced nervously beneath him. The sun was fully up now, burning off the last of the fog. Aiyana could hear the river behind her, constant and indifferent. She thought about the man inside her cabin, wondered if he was conscious yet, if he knew how close danger was. She thought about her people, scattered to the winds, and about the countless others who had been scattered before them. She thought about silence and invisibility, about survival and complicity. Then she did something she hadn't done in 6 years. She spoke. The words came out in Cherokee first, her voice rough from disuse. "Naski Yansa, the earth remembers." Then in English, her accent thick but her meaning clear. "No." Reed's expression hardened. The pretense of civility dropped away like a mask. "Have it your way, then." He drew his pistol. Aiyana fired. The rifle's crack split the morning air like thunder. Reed's hat flew off his head as the ball passed through it, so close it creased his skull. He toppled backward off his horse, hitting the ground hard. The black horse bolted, and the other 2 mounts reared in panic. Cobb fumbled for his weapon while trying to control his horse. Turner raised his rifle, but Tahu was already moving, a grey streak of violence that covered the distance in 3 bounds. The wolf dog leaped, jaws closing on Turner's arm before he could fire. The man screamed as he was dragged from his saddle, his rifle discharging into the air. Aiyana was already moving too, dropping the spent rifle and pulling a knife from her belt. A hunting blade with a bone handle, sharp enough to field dress a deer. Cobb had his pistol out now, but his horse was wheeling in circles. His shot went wide, splintering wood from the cabin wall. Reed was on his feet, blood streaming from the furrow in his scalp, his pale eyes now bright with fury. "Kill them both!" he roared. But the clearing had descended into chaos. Turner was on the ground, Tahu's jaws locked on his arm, his screams mixing with the frightened baying of the bloodhounds. Cobb fired again, this time at the wolf dog, but missed as his horse bucked. The bullet kicked up dirt near Turner's head, making him scream louder. Reed aimed his pistol at Aiyana with both hands, steadying his aim despite the blood in his eyes. She saw his finger tighten on the trigger and threw herself sideways, hitting the ground and rolling. The shot passed through the space where she'd been standing and punched through the oiled cloth covering her window. She came up running, heading not away but toward Reed. The knife held low. It was a move he didn't expect. Most people ran from guns, not toward them. She covered the distance before he could fire again, slashing upward. The blade caught his gun hand, opening a deep cut across his palm. He dropped the pistol with a curse. Behind her, she heard bone crack. Tahu had broken Turner's arm. The man's screams reached a new pitch. Cobb finally got his horse under control and spurred toward Aiyana, raising his pistol for a point-blank shot. But as he closed the distance, the cabin door burst open. The runaway stood in the doorway, swaying, one hand braced against the frame. He was weak, fever-bright, but in his hand he held Aiyana's spare rifle, an older one she kept loaded by the door. He didn't aim carefully. He didn't need to. Cobb was less than 15 feet away. The shot caught Cobb in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He fell from his horse, landing hard, his pistol skittering across the dirt. Reed lunged for the dropped weapon, his injured hand trailing blood. Aiyana was faster. She kicked it away and drove her knife down toward his chest. He rolled, and the blade sank into the earth instead. But she was on him, knee on his chest, pulling the knife free. For a moment their eyes met, hers dark and filled with 6 years of accumulated rage, his pale and calculating even now, trying to find an angle, a way to survive this. "You should have left," she said in English, the words feeling strange in her mouth. "You should have just left." She raised the knife, a pistol cocked behind her head. "Drop it, squaw, or I paint your brains across this clearing." Cobb, despite his shattered shoulder, had retrieved his weapon. He stood 5 feet away, swaying but determined, the pistol aimed at the back of her skull. Everything stopped. Turner's screaming had faded to whimpers. Tahu stood over him, growling, waiting. The runaway leaned in the doorway, unable to reload, barely able to stand. Reed lay beneath her, breathing hard, blood pooling from his hand. "Drop the knife," Cobb repeated. "Or die, your choice." Aiyana's fingers tightened on the bone handle. She had made her choices already this morning, had made them when she pulled the man from the river, when she aimed her rifle at Reed, when she spoke after 6 years of silence. There was no going back from any of it. She would not drop the knife, but she didn't need to decide what to do next because Tahu decided for her. The wolf dog left Turner and covered the ground to Cobb in a blur of grey fur and white teeth. And Cobb turned, fired. The shot went into Tahu's shoulder, but it didn't stop him. Couldn't stop him. Tahu hit Cobb like a falling tree, jaws closing on the man's throat. The scream was brief and wet, and then silent. Reed used the distraction to throw Aiyana off him, surging upward with surprising strength. He grabbed her wrist, trying to turn the knife against her, and they grappled in the dirt, rolling, each trying to gain advantage. He was larger, stronger, but she was fighting for more than her life. She was fighting for the right to have said no, for the right to have chosen, for the right to matter. Her knee found his groin. He gasped, loosened his grip, and she pulled the knife free and slashed across his face. The blade opened his cheek from ear to jaw. He fell back, hands going to the wound, blood pouring between his fingers. She scrambled away, knife ready, but he wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was clutching his face, making sounds that were almost whimpers. The great Silas Reed reduced to this. Tahu limped back to her side, blood matting his fur where the bullet had grazed him. Turner was crawling away, dragging his broken arm, making for the trees. Cobb lay still in the dirt, his blood darkening the earth. The runaway had collapsed in the doorway, unconscious again from the effort of standing and firing. And Reed was staring at her with those pale eyes, something new in them now, not just pain, not just rage. Fear. "Please," he whispered through his ruined mouth. "Please. I got money. No," Aiyana said again, her voice stronger now, clearer. "No more." She stood over him with the knife, and for a long moment she considered ending it. It would be justice, wouldn't it? For every person he'd dragged back to slavery, for every life he'd traded for silver, for every scream he'd ignored. But her grandmother's voice came again. "The earth remembers who bled upon it, daughter. Choose what it will remember about you." She lowered the knife. "Go," she said. "Walk. Tell them what happened here. Tell them what an Indian woman and her wolf did. Tell them all." Reed stared at her, not understanding at first. She stepped back, giving him room to rise. He got to his feet slowly, still clutching his face. Blood ran down his neck, soaked into his collar. He looked at Cobb's body, at Turner disappearing into the trees, at the wolf dog with its amber eyes fixed on him. "This ain't over," he managed to say. You think you can—" "It is over," Aiyana interrupted. "For you. Here, now. Go, before I change my mind." He went, stumbling at first, then moving faster, crashing through the brush toward where his horse had fled. She listened to him go, the sounds fading into the distance, swallowed by the swamp. When silence returned, she went to check on the runaway. The man slept for 3 days. Aiyana tended him in that time, changing his dressings, forcing water and thin broth between his lips when he was conscious enough to swallow. The fever came in waves. Sometimes he shook so hard she had to pile every blanket she owned on top of him. Other times he burned so hot she worried his brain would cook inside his skull. On the second night, he spoke in his sleep. Names mostly. Sarah, Marcus, Mama. His voice broke on that last one, became a child's voice, pleading. Aiyana sat beside him and placed a cool cloth on his forehead. Said nothing, but stayed. Tahu's wound was less serious than it looked. The bullet had torn through muscle without hitting bone. She packed it with yarrow and comfrey, wrapped it tight, and the wolf dog accepted the treatment with stoic silence. He spent those days lying near the door, watching, always watching. She had dragged Cobb's body into the swamp, weighted it with stones, and pushed it into deep water. The gators would take care of the rest. Turner's trail had led south. She tracked it for a mile before losing it in a creek. He would either make it back to civilization or die in the wilderness. She found she didn't particularly care which. Reed's blood had stained the earth in front of her cabin. She tried to wash it away, but it had soaked in too deep. The ground remembered. On the morning of the 4th day, she woke to find the man's eyes open, watching her. They were brown, deep and dark, with flecks of gold that caught the morning light. Intelligent eyes, wary eyes, eyes that had seen too much. "Ma'am," he said, his voice rough as gravel. Where am I?" She was sitting by the fire, grinding herbs, Tahu at her feet. She set down her work and came to kneel beside him. "Safe," she said simply. It was only the 3rd or 4th time she'd spoken in the days since the fight, and her voice still felt strange to her. He tried to sit up, gasped, fell back. His hand went to the bandages wrapped around his ribs. The bounty hunters, gone. "They'll come back," They always come back. You got to—" He stopped, really looking at her for the first time, seeing her face, her features, her Cherokee clothing. Understanding flickered in his eyes. "You ain't white." "No. But you helped me." "Why?" The question wasn't accusatory, just confused, as if kindness from a stranger was something so foreign he couldn't quite process it. Aiyana considered how to answer. She could tell him about the Trail of Tears, about her mother, about the 6 years she'd spent in this swamp, nursing her rage like a small hot coal in her chest. She could explain how saving him had felt like reclaiming something that had been taken from her: agency, choice, the right to say no to cruelty. Instead, she said, "The earth does not forget who bled upon it, neither do I." He stared at her, processing this. Then slowly he nodded. "My name's Isaiah Freeman." He pronounced the last name with emphasis, like it was something he'd chosen himself, something precious. I ain't a slave no more. Been running for 2 weeks. Came from a plantation outside Milledgeville. Man who owned me was named Thaddeus Whitmore. Meanest son of a bitch in Georgia. Worked us near to death, beat us when we couldn't work no more, then beat us again for sport." His jaw clenched. "He killed my wife, Sarah. She was pregnant. She couldn't work fast enough in her condition, and he stopped, couldn't continue." Aiyana said nothing, but her hand found his, squeezed once. A brief acknowledgement of pain she understood too well. "When they buried her," Isaiah continued after a moment, "I knew I couldn't stay. I'd die there, either quick from a beating or slow from a broken heart. So I ran, followed the river like folks said to do. Heard there was Quakers up north who'd help, and Indians sometimes too, ones who remembered what it was like to be hunted." He met her eyes. "Guess I found one." "Aiyana," she said. "My name is Aiyana." He tried to smile, managed a ghost of one. "That's real pretty. What's it mean?" "Eternal bloom." She looked away, toward the window where morning light filtered through. "My grandmother named me. She said I was born during the first flower moon, that I'd live forever like the spring." Her voice hardened slightly. "She died on the trail west. Turns out names don't mean much." "They mean everything," Isaiah said quietly. "They mean we existed, that we were people with histories and hopes, not just property, not just things." He shifted, wincing. "How bad am I hurt?" "You'll live. Infections are clearing. Ribs are cracked but not broken. Wounds are healing clean. How long before I can travel?" "A week, maybe 2. You need rest, food, strength." Isaiah shook his head. "Don't have that kind of time. Reed, that bounty hunter, he don't give up. Ever. He's probably gathering men right now, coming back with enough firepower to burn this whole swamp down. I can't let that happen. I won't let you get hurt worse because of me." "Reed isn't coming back," Aiyana said with certainty. "How you know?" She stood, went to a shelf and pulled down something wrapped in cloth. When she unfolded it, Reed's pistol lay inside. The one he'd dropped, expensive and engraved with his initials. Beside it was his hat, the one with the bullet hole through it, and a small leather-bound book. "I found these after. The book, it's his ledger. Names of slaves caught, prices paid, plantations delivered to. There's more than 300 names in here." She held it up, and her hand trembled slightly with barely contained fury. 300 lives bought and sold like livestock. He kept it like a trophy book, like he was proud. Isaiah's face had gone hard as stone. "Burn it." "No," Aiyana said. "We keep it. Evidence. Proof. Maybe someday it matters." She set it aside. "Reed is hurt bad. I marked him, Isaiah. Marked him so everyone who sees him will know he lost. Men like him, their power comes from fear. I took that from him. You don't know these men like I do. Fear ain't all they got. They got law on their side. They got guns and money and the whole damn system backing them up. One loss ain't gonna stop." A sound outside silenced him. Footsteps, careful and deliberate, approaching the cabin. Tahu was on his feet instantly, hackles raised. Aiyana grabbed her rifle, moved to the window. 3 figures emerged from the tree line, moving slowly, hands visible and empty of weapons. 2 men and a woman, all of them black, all of them dressed in the worn, patched clothing of field workers. The woman carried a bundle wrapped in cloth. The men looked nervous, scanning the trees, expecting danger. "You know them?" Aiyana asked Isaiah. He had managed to sit up, grimacing with pain, and now he looked through the window. His eyes widened. "Sweet Jesus, that's Marcus. That's my brother Marcus, and those are Sarah's folks, her mama and daddy. How did they—" Aiyana lowered the rifle and opened the door. The 3 stopped, uncertain, taking in the sight of her, an Indian woman, armed, standing in front of a cabin with a wolf dog beside her. The woman, Sarah's mother, spoke first. "We're looking for a man named Isaiah Freeman. We heard he might be here. We heard someone helped him." "How did you hear?" Aiyana's voice was cautious. If they knew, others might know. If others knew, trouble was coming. Marcus stepped forward. He was younger than Isaiah, maybe 20, with the same strong build and watchful eyes. "Turner, the bounty hunter's man. He made it back to Milledgeville half dead, talking crazy about an Indian witch and a demon wolf. Said Reed got his face carved up. Said Cobb got his throat torn out. Said there was a cabin on the Ocmulgee where the devil himself lived. When white folks talk about devils," Sarah's father added, "we pay attention. Because what they call devil, we sometimes call savior." We put the word out, asked around. Creek Indians said there was a Cherokee woman living alone out here, woman who'd lost her people. Figured it might be true. "You came here?" Aiyana couldn't quite believe it. "You walked here? All of you? You're still enslaved, aren't you? If you're caught—" "They'll kill us," the mother said simply. "Probably. But Isaiah's all we got left of our Sarah. She loved that man with everything she had. If there's a chance he's alive, if there's a chance he made it—" Her voice broke. "We had to know, had to see him one more time before he goes north. Had to give him this." She held up the bundle. Isaiah appeared in the doorway, leaning on the frame, tears streaming down his face. "Marcus, Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Thompson, y'all can't be here. Y'all got to go back before you're missed." But Marcus was already running to him, catching him in an embrace that made Isaiah cry out in pain and joy simultaneously. The Thompsons followed, and soon all 4 of them were holding each other, crying, talking over each other in rushed whispers. Aiyana stepped back, giving them space. She watched from a distance, Tahu beside her, and felt something crack in her chest, that hard, cold shell she'd built around herself. She was witnessing love, she realized. Love strong enough to risk death for. Love that survived separation and loss, and the systematic destruction of everything that made people human. Her people had had that love too. She had seen it in the way families clung together on the trail west, in the way her mother had used her last breath to whisper, "I love you," in Cherokee. That love hadn't saved them, but it had meant something. It had mattered. After a time, Mrs. Thompson approached her, still holding her bundle. Up close, Aiyana could see she was perhaps 50, her hair streaked with grey, her hands scarred from years of labour. But her eyes were kind. "Thank you," she said simply, "for my boy, for Sarah's boy. I only did what anyone—" "No," Mrs. Thompson's voice was firm. "Not anyone. Most people, they see a runaway, they see a problem, they see something they got to report or ignore or turn away from. You saw a person. You saw someone worth saving. That ain't common. That's rare as gold." She held out the bundle. "This was Sarah's, her wedding dress. I made it for her from feed sacks and old curtains, dyed it with pokeberry juice till it was pretty. She wore it the day she and Isaiah jumped the broom. I want him to have it. Want him to remember there was joy, not just pain. Want him to carry her north with him in a way." Aiyana took the bundle carefully, feeling its weight. "I'll make sure he keeps it safe." Marcus had helped Isaiah back inside and onto the pallet by the fire. Now he approached Aiyana as well. "Ma'am, Aiyana, we got word about Reed. He made it back to Milledgeville, but he's hurt bad. Lost his crew, lost his reputation, and word is he's going crazy, talking about demons and witches, saying he's going to come back here with an army. Nobody's taking him serious right now. He sounds like a madman. But eventually someone will listen. You got to know that. I know. Then you also got to know you can't stay here, neither can Isaiah. They'll come eventually, maybe not today or tomorrow, but eventually, and when they do... I've been living in this swamp for 6 years, Aiyana said. I know every game trail, every gator nest, every place the ground is solid, and every place it'll swallow you whole. Let them come. They'll find the swamp don't give up her secrets easily. Mr. Thompson shook his head. You're one woman and one wolf, no matter how fierce. We're asking you to come with us. Or at least to send Isaiah north and disappear yourself. There's folks who can help. Underground Railroad folks, Quakers, free blacks in the north. You don't have to fight this alone. I've been alone for 6 years, Aiyana said. I'm used to it. Being used to something don't make it right, Mrs. Thompson said gently. Don't make it good. Sarah used to say that loneliness is just another kind of death, slower than a bullet but just as final. Don't choose that, please. Doom, they stayed for 2 hours, those precious stolen hours that could cost them everything. They talked and cried and laughed quietly. Marcus produced cornbread wrapped in cloth and they shared it around the fire. Isaiah told them about his plans, to follow the river north to Tennessee, then cut east toward Kentucky, where he'd heard there were free black settlements. Marcus shared news from the plantation. Whitmore had hired new overseers, meaner than the last ones. 2 people had died in the past month. The mood was dark. Someone's gonna run again, Marcus said quietly. Soon. Maybe me. I can't watch this anymore. Can't be a part of it. You run. You come here first, Aiyana said. I'll help. I'll help anyone who needs it. They stared at her. You mean that? Marcus asked. The earth does not forget who bled upon it, Aiyana repeated. And I will not forget who helped me remember I'm still alive, still capable of choosing. You need help, you come. All of you. When they finally had to leave, the sun was past its peak, and they needed to be back before evening count. They embraced Isaiah one more time. Mrs. Thompson kissed his forehead like he was her own son. Mr. Thompson pressed something into his hand, a small wooden carving of a bird, wings spread. Sarah made that, he said, his voice thick, back when she was a girl. Said it was a bluebird, symbol of hope. She'd want you to have it. They left as carefully as they'd come, disappearing into the trees, 3 souls risking everything for love. Isaiah stood at the door until he couldn't see them anymore, clutching the wooden bird so tight his knuckles went white. Then he turned to Aiyana, and she saw the decision forming in his eyes. I can't go north, he said. You have to. You'll die if you stay. I'll die up north too, just slower, from knowing I left them behind. From knowing I ran while they suffered. Sarah's gone, but her people are still there. Marcus is still there, and now you're in danger because of me, he shook his head. No, I'm done running. I'm going to fight. Fight what? The whole system, the law, the guns and money, and I'm going to burn Whitmore's plantation to the ground, Isaiah said, and his voice was absolutely certain. I'm going to free everyone I can, and I'm going to make sure that bastard never owns another soul, and if I die doing it... He looked at the bird carving, at Sarah's wedding dress. At least I'll die for something that matters. Aiyana studied him for a long moment. She saw her own rage reflected in his eyes, her own need to do something, to matter, to push back against a world that had taken everything. You'll need help, she said finally. He blinked. What? You think you're going to attack a plantation alone? In your condition? You'll be shot before you reach the main house. She moved to her shelf, began pulling down supplies. You'll need weapons, a plan, someone who knows the land, someone who has a wolf dog. I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. She turned to face him, and for the first time in 6 years, she felt something like purpose kindling in her chest. My people are gone. I can't save them. but maybe I can save some of yours. Maybe that matters. Maybe that's enough." Isaiah stared at her, then slowly smiled. A real smile this time, fierce and bright. "You know this is probably going to get us both killed." "I've been half dead for 6 years," Aiyana said. "Might as well be fully alive for however long I have left." Outside, the sun was setting over the Okmulgee River, turning the water to fire. Tahu howled, long and lonely, and somewhere in the swamp, something howled back. For the next 10 days, the cabin on the Okmulgee became something it had never been before, a place of preparation, a forge where pain was hammered into purpose. Isaiah healed faster than Aiyana expected. Youth and determination were powerful medicines. By the end of the first week, he could walk without wincing, could breathe without the catch in his ribs. She taught him the swamp, showed him which paths were solid and which would pull him under, where the gators nested and where the snakes sunned themselves. He learned quickly, storing everything away like ammunition. At night, they planned. "Whitmore's plantation is called Redemption Hill," Isaiah told her, his voice bitter on the name. 2,300 acres, mostly cotton. He's got about 200 slaves working it, men, women, children. Guards patrol at night, but they're lazy, drunk mostly. Real security is the dogs, and the fact that everyone's too scared to run. After Sarah, he stopped, gathered himself. After Sarah, he gathered everyone up and made us watch while he beat a man near to death, just to remind us what happens when we get ideas. Man's name was Joseph. He lived, but barely. "Where are the slaves housed?" Aiyana asked. She was sharpening knives by the fire, the sound of stone on steel a steady rhythm. 3 big cabins on the east side of the main house, near the cotton sheds. They lock us in at night, bar the doors from outside. There's an overseer's house between the cabins and the main house. 2 overseers, both armed. Mean bastards, especially one called Rayburn. He's the one who—" Isaiah's jaw clenched. "He's the one who beat Sarah." Aiyana's hand stilled on the blade. "Then Rayburn dies first." "I want Whitmore," Isaiah said. "He's mine." They looked at each other across the fire, 2 people bound by loss and rage, and came to an understanding without words. This wouldn't be a rescue. It would be a reckoning. On the 8th day, Marcus came back. He arrived at dusk, moving fast. Fear in his eyes. Tahu alerted them with a low growl, but Aiyana recognized his silhouette and called the wolf dog down. "They know," Marcus panted, stumbling into the clearing. "They know Isaiah's alive, know someone's helping him." Turner talked before he died. Infection took him 3 days ago, and Reed's been talking to everyone who'll listen. They're organizing a search party, 20 men, maybe more, planning to sweep the whole river valley. They're coming, and soon. Isaiah grabbed his brother, steadied him. "Slow down. When? Tomorrow. Maybe the day after. Reed's leading them. He's got a bandage over half his face and he's talking crazy, but enough people believe him that they're willing to look. They're bringing dogs, guns, everything." Marcus looked at Aiyana. "Ma'am, you got to leave, both of you, tonight." But Aiyana was already shaking her head. "If we run now, we run forever. They'll hunt us until we're caught or dead. We either hide until they pass or—" She paused, an idea forming. "Or we hit them first." "Hit them how?" Isaiah asked. "They're looking for a cabin with an Indian woman and a runaway slave, so we give them something else to look at. We make them chase shadows while we do what needs doing." She moved to the window, stared out at the darkening swamp. "Marcus, you said 20 men. At least. Split them up. Half will stay in Milledgeville, guard the town. The other half will search. That's 10 men maximum, stumbling through swamp they don't know, hunting for a cabin that won't be here when they arrive." "What do you mean, won't be here?" Isaiah asked. Aiyana smiled, and it wasn't a kind expression. "I mean, we burn it. We burn it tonight, take everything we need, and disappear. Let them find ashes and nothing else. While they're wasting time looking for us here, we'll be 20 miles south, hitting the plantation. They'll never expect it. Why would we attack when we're being hunted?" Marcus stared, That's insane. That's survival, Aiyana corrected. It's what my people did when the soldiers came. We scattered, we moved, we made them chase ghosts. It works if you know the land better than they do. She turned to Isaiah. How many people at Redemption Hill would fight if they had weapons? Most of them, all of them, maybe, if they thought they could win. Then we give them that chance. We arm them, we free them, and we burn Whitmore's world to the ground. And we do it while Reed and his hunters are chasing smoke in the wrong direction. She looked between the two brothers. You said someone was going to run again soon. Make it everyone. Make it all of them. Isaiah and Marcus exchanged glances. Some wordless communication passed between them, the kind only siblings shared. Then Marcus nodded slowly. I'm in. I'll go back tonight. Spread the word quietly. Tell people to be ready that help is coming. But Aiyana, you got to understand, if this fails, they'll kill everyone. Not just the ones who fight. Everyone. Women, children, old people. Whitmore will make an example that'll be remembered for generations. Then we don't fail, Aiyana said simply. They spent the next few hours preparing. Aiyana packed everything essential. Food, medicine, ammunition, knives, the ledger she'd taken from Reed. She bundled Sarah's wedding dress carefully and gave it to Isaiah. Keep it close. Remember what you're fighting for. They moved everything to a hollow she knew, a half-mile away, hidden behind a curtain of vines and protected by a rock overhang. Then, as the moon rose, they set fire to the cabin. Aiyana stood and watched it burn. 6 years of solitude going up in smoke, the flames reflected in her dark eyes, and she felt relief. This place had been a tomb, a place to hide from the world. She didn't need it anymore. She had remembered how to be alive, how to choose, how to matter. The fire burned through the night, bright enough to be seen for miles. Let Reed see it. Let him think she'd fled or died or been smoked out. Let him search the ruins and find nothing. By morning, they were gone. They traveled south along game trails only Aiyana knew, moving fast despite Isaiah's lingering injuries. Tahu ranged ahead, scouting, his grey fur making him nearly invisible in the pre-dawn light. Marcus knew these woods too, from a lifetime of hunting and foraging, and between his knowledge and Aiyana's, they moved like ghosts. At midday, they stopped to rest near a creek. Marcus shared news he'd gathered before leaving. Whitmore's expecting a buyer from Alabama tomorrow. Big sale. 20 people, families mostly. Wants to show off his operation, prove his slaves are high quality. Main house will be full of white men drinking and dealing. Guards will be focused on that. Perfect time to attack, Isaiah said. They'll be drunk, distracted. Or perfect time to get killed, Marcus countered. More white men means more guns. Also means more chaos when things go wrong, Aiyana pointed out. We don't need to kill everyone. We just need to create enough confusion that people can escape. Fire does most of the work. They reached the outskirts of Redemption Hill just after nightfall. Aiyana had never seen a plantation before. Her people had been farmers, but nothing like this. The scale of it staggered her. Row upon row of cotton plants stretched toward the horizon, a white sea under the moonlight. The main house sat on a hill, 3 stories of white columns and wealth built on suffering. Below it, the slave cabins hunched like scars on the earth. They watched from the tree line as guards made their rounds. 2 men, both carrying rifles, both moving with the casual confidence of people who had never been challenged. Lights burned in the main house. Laughter drifted down the hill. Tomorrow, Isaiah whispered. We hit them tomorrow night, during the sale. Marcus, you get inside somehow, start unlocking doors. Aiyana and I will create the diversion. What kind of diversion? Aiyana smiled in the darkness, the kind that makes them forget about everything except surviving. They spent that night in a tobacco barn a mile away, taking turns on watch. Aiyana couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the 200 people in those cabins, people who would wake tomorrow with no idea their lives were about to change, one way or another. She thought about her mother dying on the trail. She thought about Sarah, beaten to death for being pregnant. She thought about all the casual cruelty the world inflicted on people whose only crime was existing in the wrong body, the wrong place, the wrong time. The anger that had sustained her for 6 years burned clean and hot in her chest. Tomorrow she would do something with it. Tomorrow it would matter. At dawn, Marcus slipped away to infiltrate the plantation. He was a known slave, could talk his way in, could move through the cabins without raising suspicion. Isaiah and Aiyana spent the day making final preparations. They made torches, dozens of them, soaked in pitch from pine trees. They filled bottles with lamp oil, stuffed rags in the necks. They checked and rechecked their weapons. As the sun set on their last day as the people they had been, Aiyana performed a ceremony her grandmother had taught her. She built a small fire, burned sage and tobacco, spoke prayers in Cherokee that felt rusty but right in her mouth. She prayed for courage, for justice, for the spirits of the dead to guide them. Isaiah watched, said nothing, but when she finished, he added his own prayer, a Christian one, asking God to watch over Sarah's soul and give them strength for what was coming. "You think he listens?" Aiyana asked. "Your God, after everything he's allowed?" "I think he weeps," Isaiah said quietly, "and I think he's waiting for his people to do his work. Maybe that's us tonight. Maybe we're his wrath. Or maybe we're just two people who are tired of being powerless," Aiyana said. "Maybe that's enough." As full darkness fell, they moved into position. They could hear music now, fiddle and laughter from the main house. The sale was in full swing. Marcus had promised to unlock the cabin doors at midnight. That would be their signal. Aiyana crouched in the shadows with Tahu, watching the overseer's house. A man sat on the porch smoking a pipe. Rayburn, she guessed from Isaiah's description. Large, mean-looking, with a whip coiled at his belt. Isaiah touched her shoulder, pointed. Marcus was moving between the cabins, barely visible in the darkness, working on the locks. 1, 2, 3 doors opened silently. "Now," Isaiah breathed. Aiyana lit the first torch, and the night exploded into fire. The first torch arced through the darkness like a falling star and crashed through the window of the overseer's house. Glass shattered, and for a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then flames bloomed inside, orange and hungry, catching on curtains and wooden furniture. Rayburn leaped to his feet, his pipe falling from his mouth. "Fire! Fire!" His shouts split the night. The second torch hit the cotton shed. Dried cotton caught instantly, burning with a roar that sounded almost alive. White-hot flames shot 30 feet into the air, turning night into day. Aiyana was already running, Tahu beside her, moving toward the slave cabins where Marcus was throwing open the last of the doors. Confused faces appeared in the doorways, men and women woken from exhausted sleep, children clutching their parents, everyone blinking against the sudden firelight. "Run!" Marcus was shouting. "North! Follow the river north! Go, go, go!" But they were frozen, caught between disbelief and lifelong conditioning. Slaves didn't run. Slaves who ran died. The fear was carved into their bones. Aiyana raised her voice, speaking in English but with all the command her grandmother had once used when calling the clan together. "The doors are open. You are free. Take your freedom or die in chains. Choose." Something in her voice, the absolute certainty of it, the Cherokee inflection that marked her as outside their system, as someone who had already lost everything and survived, broke through. A woman moved first, scooping up a child and running toward the trees. Then another. Then all of them, a flood of humanity pouring from the cabins like water from a broken dam. Gunshots rang out from the main house. The guards had emerged, silhouetted against the burning cotton shed, firing wildly into the chaos. A man went down 10 feet from Aiyana, clutching his leg. She grabbed him under the arms, dragged him toward cover while Tahu snarled at their heels. Isaiah had circled toward the main house, and now she saw him moving through the smoke with terrible purpose. He held a pistol in each hand, weapons they'd taken from Reed's men, and his face was set like stone. More slaves were running now, dozens of them, disappearing into the tree line, but guards were coming from all directions, and the men from the house, the buyers, the overseers, Whitmore himself, were arming themselves. This was going to become a slaughter if they didn't keep the attention on themselves. Aiyana lit another torch and threw it at the main house. It hit the porch, and the dry wood caught immediately. Screams erupted from inside, panic now, not anger. Rich men who dealt in misery suddenly facing their own mortality. Rayburn emerged from the burning overseer's house, his clothes smoking, rage contorting his features. He spotted Marcus helping an old woman toward the trees and raised his rifle. Tahu moved like lightning, covering the distance in seconds. His jaws closed on Rayburn's gun arm and the rifle discharged into the air. Rayburn screamed and tried to shake the wolf dog off, but Tahu held on with the grip of something more than animal. Held on with the fury of 6 years of Aiyana's silent rage made manifest. Aiyana reached them and drove her knife into Rayburn's side, once, twice. He folded, and Tahu released him, let him fall. The overseer clutched the wounds, blood pouring between his fingers, and looked up at her with incomprehension. "For Sarah," Aiyana said coldly, "and everyone else." She left him there and ran toward the main house, where Isaiah had disappeared into the smoke. The interior was chaos, flames eating the walls, thick smoke choking the air. She wrapped a wet cloth around her face and pushed inside. Bodies rushed past her, white men fleeing, coughing, some of them on fire. She didn't stop them. This wasn't about murder. This was about breaking the machine. "Isaiah," she called. "Isaiah! Upstairs!" His voice came from above, tight with rage, and something that might have been grief. She found the stairs and climbed through smoke that burned her lungs. The second floor was an inferno. She could see Isaiah at the end of a hallway, standing in a doorway, his pistols aimed at someone inside. She reached him and looked past him into what had to be Whitmore's bedroom. The plantation owner was there, backed against a wall, his face pale with terror. He was perhaps 60, heavy-set, dressed in a silk nightshirt that would have been comical if not for the circumstances. "Please," Whitmore was saying, his voice high and thin. "Please. I got money. I got gold. I'll give you anything. Just don't." "Where was Sarah's please?" Isaiah's voice was dead calm, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. "Where was her don't? Did you listen when she begged you not to beat her? Did you listen when she said she was carrying a child?" "I didn't. I didn't mean for her to die. She was valuable. I wouldn't have—" "She was a person." Isaiah's shout echoed through the burning house. "She was my wife. She had a name and dreams, and she laughed like music, and you killed her because she couldn't work fast enough while growing my child in her belly." The pistol shook in his hand. Aiyana could see him wavering, torn between the need for justice and the cost of becoming a killer. She understood the weight of that decision. She had made it herself when she chose to let Reed live, had questioned it every day since. She stepped forward, placed her hand on Isaiah's arm. "The house is burning. If we stay much longer, we burn with it." "He deserves to burn," Isaiah said, but his voice cracked. "He does," Aiyana agreed. "But do you deserve to become him? Do you want Sarah's last gift to you to be turning you into a murderer?" Isaiah's face twisted with anguish. The pistol lowered slightly. Whitmore saw his chance. He lunged for a rifle leaning against the wall. Tahu was there. The wolf dog had followed them upstairs, and now he hit Whitmore like a thunderbolt, driving him to the ground. But he didn't bite. He simply held the man down, growling, waiting for a command. Isaiah stared at the fallen plantation owner, at the man who had stolen and destroyed so many lives. Then he did something Aiyana didn't expect. He picked up the rifle Whitmore had reached for and smashed it against the floor, breaking it in half. Then he did the same with his pistols, shattering them against the wall. "I won't kill you," Isaiah said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Not because you deserve to live, but because I deserve to be better than you." I deserved to build something instead of just destroying. Sarah deserved that too. He turned toward the door, toward Aiyana. Let's go. Let him die from his own greed or escape to live in shame. I don't care anymore. They ran, Tahu with them, leaving Whitmore screaming behind them. The stairs were almost consumed when they descended, flames licking at their clothes. They burst out into the night, gasping for clean air. The plantation was a vision of the apocalypse. The main house burned like a torch. The cotton sheds were gone, reduced to glowing skeletons. The overseer's house had collapsed in on itself. Bodies lay scattered, some of the guards, some of the buyers who had tried to stop the fleeing slaves. But most of the slaves themselves had made it to the trees, had disappeared into the night. Marcus found them near the tree line, his face streaked with soot. Most of them got away, maybe 150, 160. Some wanted to go back, to get family or belongings. But I told them there wasn't time. We got to move now, before more men come from town. Where's the group headed? Aiyana asked. Split up, like we planned. Some going north, following the river, others cutting west toward Cherokee territory, others just running anywhere that's away from here. Better chance if we scatter. Marcus looked at his brother. You good? Isaiah nodded slowly, though his eyes were haunted. I'm alive. That's more than Sarah got, more than a lot of people got. Yeah, I'm good. They melted into the forest as bells began to ring in Milledgeville. Alarm bells calling for help, for water, for men with guns. But by the time anyone arrived with enough organization to pursue, the fugitives would be ghosts, scattered across Georgia like seeds on the wind. Aiyana led them deep into territory she knew, places where the swamp was thickest and most treacherous. Behind them, the glow of Redemption Hills burning lit up the sky like a second dawn. They traveled through the night and into the next day, stopping only briefly to rest and drink from clean streams. Other groups of escapees passed them going different directions. A mother with 3 children, an old couple holding hands, young men who looked ready to fight if pursued. Each time, they shared what little information they had, safe directions, places to avoid, rumors of where the patrols might be. By the second night, they reached a place Aiyana had heard of but never seen. A settlement deep in the swamp where Creek Indians and fugitive slaves lived together, hidden from the world. It was little more than a collection of cabins built on raised platforms above the water, connected by walkways of cypress logs. But it was organized, defended, and most importantly, free. An old Creek man met them at the edge of the settlement, a rifle in his hands, but his posture more curious than hostile. He looked at Aiyana, at Isaiah and Marcus, at Tahu, and slowly smiled. Cherokee? He asked in English. Yes, Aiyana answered in Creek. Her grandmother had taught her enough to communicate. We heard the sky was red last night in the east, heard rumors of a plantation burning, of slaves walking free. That your work? It was justice, Aiyana said, long overdue. The old man's smile widened. Justice is always welcome here. Come, rest. You're safe now. They followed him into the settlement, where people emerged from cabins to stare at the newcomers. Word spread quickly. These were the ones from Redemption Hill, the ones who had fought back. They were welcomed with food, with shelter, with the kind of acceptance that came from shared understanding of what it meant to be hunted. That night, around a communal fire, Isaiah told their story. He spoke of Sarah, of Aiyana saving him, of the battle at her cabin, of the burning of Redemption Hill. Others shared their stories too, escapes, losses, small victories against an impossible system. The stories wove together into something larger than any individual tale, became a tapestry of resistance and survival. An elderly woman, part Creek and part African, approached Aiyana as the fire burned low. You know what you've done, girl. You know what you've started. I freed some people, Aiyana said. That's all. No, the woman shook her head. You gave them hope. You showed them that the system can be fought, that the powerful can bleed, that one woman and one wolf dog can stand against all that cruelty and win. Stories like that spread faster than fire. Slaves all across Georgia gonna hear about the Cherokee woman who mutilated Reed and burned Whitmore's plantation. They're gonna wonder, if she can fight, maybe I can too. Maybe we can too. That's dangerous thinking, Aiyana said. The most dangerous kind, the woman agreed. The kind that changes the world. Aiyana looked across the fire at Isaiah, who sat with his brother, both of them finally able to relax slightly. She thought about Reed carrying his scars and his shame. She thought about Whitmore if he'd survived, and what story he would tell. She thought about the 150 people who had walked free into the night. She thought about her grandmother's words, "When the world shows you who it is, daughter, you must decide who you will be in response." She had decided. She had chosen. And whatever came next, pursuit, danger, death, she would face it as someone who had mattered, who had fought, who had refused to accept cruelty as inevitable. The fire crackled and sparked, sending embers up into the night sky like freed souls ascending. 3 weeks after Redemption Hill burned, a story appeared in the Milledgeville newspaper. It was brief, buried on the 3rd page between advertisements for farm equipment and notices of slave auctions. Property loss at Redemption Hill. Local plantation owner T. Whitmore reports extensive fire damage to his estate and the escape of approximately 150 slaves. Authorities suspect arson and outside agitation. Mr. Whitmore, who survived the incident with minor injuries, has posted a reward of $500 for information leading to the capture of those responsible. Particular interest in reports of an Indian woman and accomplices seen in the vicinity. Bounty hunter S. Reed has declined to comment on the matter. That was the official version. The version that white Georgia told itself, safe and sanitized. The real story, the one that spread through slave quarters and Indian camps, whispered around fires and coded into songs, was something else entirely. They said Aiyana was 7 feet tall, that her wolf dog was actually a spirit animal that couldn't be killed by bullets. They said she could make herself invisible in the swamp, could speak to the trees and the water. They said she had carved ancient Cherokee symbols into Reed's flesh that cursed him to see demons every time he closed his eyes. They said she had walked through the flames of Redemption Hill untouched, that she had freed the slaves with a single word of power. The truth was less dramatic, but more important. She was a woman who had chosen to act when action cost everything, and others had chosen to follow her example. Aiyana stayed at the Creek settlement through the winter of 1844 and into the spring of 1845. Isaiah and Marcus stayed too, helping to build new cabins, to organize defenses, to plan routes for other fugitives making their way north. The settlement grew, swelling with escapees who had heard about the safe haven in the swamp. But Aiyana grew restless. She had spent 6 years hiding, and now she found that stopping, even in a safe place, even among friends, felt wrong. She had tasted purpose, and it was addictive. One night in March, she found Isaiah sitting by the water, staring out at the moon-silvered swamp. He had healed fully now, had gained weight, looked healthy, but his eyes still carried Sarah with him everywhere. "I'm leaving," Aiyana said, sitting beside him. He wasn't surprised. "Where?" "Back toward the Okmulgee. There are more people who need help, more who are running. I can guide them here, or north, or wherever they need to go." "That's dangerous. Reed might be broken, but there are other bounty hunters, and after Redemption Hill they'll be looking harder." "Let them look." Aiyana's voice was calm. "The swamp is mine. I know every shadow, every sound. They can send 100 men, and I'll still disappear when I choose." Isaiah smiled slightly. "You're different than when we met. Louder, more present." "I was dead for 6 years," Aiyana said. "I think I'm alive again. It's uncomfortable, but I prefer it. Oh, when I go north, and I will go eventually, probably this summer, will you come?" She considered it. The north meant safety, meant freedom, meant a chance to build a life without constantly looking over her shoulder. But it also meant leaving this land, these swamps that her grandmother had loved, this earth that remembered her people. "No," she said finally. "This is my place. I belong here, fighting here. Someone has to stay and help the ones still running. Someone has to remember." "Ah, the earth does not forget," Isaiah quoted, her words from that first night. "Neither do I," Aiyana finished. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two souls bound by trauma and choice, before Isaiah spoke again. "Sarah would have liked you. She always said the strongest people were the ones who kept going after they had every reason to quit. She sounds wise. She was. She was everything." His voice caught, then steadied. "I'm gonna name my first child after her, when I have one. Gonna make sure her name gets spoken with love, not just pain. She deserves that." "She does," Aiyana agreed. "We all do." Aiyana left the settlement a week later. Tahu walked beside her as always, his grey fur beginning to show silver at the muzzle. He was getting older, but he moved with the same lethal grace. They returned to the Okmulgee River, to the burned remains of her cabin, to the land she knew better than her own heartbeat. She built no new cabin. Instead, she moved constantly, a ghost in the swamp, helping fugitives when she found them, leaving food and marks to guide others. She became a legend in motion, the Cherokee woman who had fought the slave catchers and won, who could vanish into mist and reappear miles away, who was protected by a spirit wolf that had tasted slaver blood. Some of it was true, most of it was myth, all of it was useful. That summer, Isaiah and Marcus made their journey north. They stopped to say goodbye, and Isaiah gave Aiyana something, Sarah's wedding dress, carefully preserved, wrapped in oilcloth. "I thought I needed to carry this," he said, "but I realize now I carry her in here." He touched his chest, over his heart. "The dress should stay in Georgia, should remind people what was stolen from us, what we're fighting to protect. I want you to have it. Use it however it helps." Aiyana took the bundle, feeling its weight. "I'll keep it safe. And when people ask about it, I'll tell them Sarah's story. I'll make sure she's remembered." They embraced, these two people who had found each other at their worst and had somehow survived to reach something like hope. Then Isaiah and Marcus walked north, toward freedom, toward futures that had once seemed impossible. Aiyana never saw them again, but she heard stories. Isaiah made it to Canada, married again, had children. He named his first daughter Sarah, and she grew up free, never knowing chains. Marcus became a conductor on the Underground Railroad, helping others make the journey he'd made. As for Aiyana, her legend grew with each passing season. By 1846, slaves across Georgia spoke of her in hushed tones, the way people spoke of saints and spirits. If you could make it to the Okmulgee River, if you could survive the swamp, she would find you, she would help you. The Cherokee woman and her wolf were real, and they were salvation. Bounty hunters still came looking for her. None found her. Some never returned from the swamp at all. The earth, it seemed, had developed a taste for those who traded in human flesh. Silas Reed died in the winter of 1846. Some said it was infection from his wounds that never properly healed. Others said he went mad, that the scars Aiyana had given him festered not just in his flesh, but in his mind, until he couldn't tell reality from nightmare. His last words, reportedly, were, the wolf is here." When Aiyana heard of his death, she felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not grief, nothing. He had already been dead to her, dead the moment he had chosen to make his living from others' suffering. The years passed. 1847, 1848, 1849. The tensions between North and South grew, sharpening toward the war that would eventually tear the nation apart. But in the swamps of Georgia, Aiyana continued her work, continued helping people escape, continued being a thorn in the side of a system that wanted to reduce humans to property. She aged, but slowly, weathered by the swamp and hardened by purpose. Her hair, which had been pure black when Isaiah first met her, began to silver at the temples. Her hands, which had been smooth, became scarred and calloused, but her eyes remained fierce and alive, the eyes of someone who had chosen to matter. Tahu aged too. By 1850, the wolf dog moved more slowly, his muzzle fully grey, but he remained loyal, protective, a constant companion. They understood each other, she and this animal that might have been something more than animal. They had both lost everything and had both chosen to keep fighting anyway. In the spring of 1850, a young woman arrived at the river, a fugitive from a plantation near Macon, heavily pregnant and desperate. Aiyana found her collapsed near the water, barely conscious. She brought the woman to a hidden shelter she maintained. A cave system she'd discovered years ago, dry and defensible. She tended to her, gave her water and food, treated the whip marks on her back. The woman's name was Hannah, and her story was heartbreakingly common. Enslaved since birth, raped by her master, pregnant with a child she had not chosen, running because she refused to let her baby be born into chains. "I heard about you," Hannah whispered as Aiyana cleaned her wounds. "Thought you was just a story, something we told ourselves to keep hope alive." "Stories and truth aren't so different," Aiyana said. "Both can keep you alive if you believe in them enough." Hannah went into labor 2 days later. It was hard. The baby was early, and Hannah was weak from her escape. Aiyana had delivered babies before, back when her people still lived in the valley, back when there had been a future to bring children into. She remembered the prayers her grandmother had taught her, the techniques, the patience required. It took 12 hours, but the baby came. A girl, small but healthy, with lungs that announced her arrival with impressive volume. Hannah wept when Aiyana placed the child in her arms, tears of joy and terror and overwhelming love. "She's free," Hannah kept saying. "She's born free. They can't never own her. She's free." "What will you name her?" Aiyana asked. Hannah looked up, eyes shining. "Aiyana, if that's all right with you. Gonna name her after the woman who made it possible." Something broke and mended simultaneously in Aiyana's chest. She had spent so long alone, had convinced herself she was comfortable with solitude, with being a ghost, with mattering only through action. But this, having someone name their child after her, having her existence mean something beyond violence and resistance, this was different. This was hope made flesh. "It's more than all right," Aiyana said, her voice rough with emotion. "It's an honor." She helped Hannah recover over the next week, taught her the route north, gave her supplies and directions to safe houses. When Hannah was strong enough to travel, Aiyana walked with her to the edge of the swamp, showed her the way. "Will I see you again?" Hannah asked, the baby bundled against her chest. "Maybe," Aiyana said. "Or maybe you'll just hear stories about me. Either way, you'll know I'm out here helping when I can. And someday, when your daughter asks where her name comes from, you tell her. Tell her about the Cherokee woman who refused to let the world break her. Tell her about choosing to fight. Tell her that freedom is something you take, not something you're given." Hannah nodded, understanding. Then she walked north with her daughter, toward a future that had once seemed impossible. Aiyana watched them go, Tahu sitting beside her. The wolf dog's breathing was labored now, his body finally failing after so many years of loyal service. She knew, with the certainty of someone who had become attuned to death, that he didn't have much time left. "We did good work," she told him, scratching behind his ears. "Didn't we, old friend? We mattered." Tahu's tail wagged once, slowly, and he pressed his head against her leg. That night, in the cave where baby Aiyana had been born, Tahu died. He went peacefully, in his sleep, his head resting on his paws. Aiyana sat with him until dawn, speaking to him in Cherokee, thanking him for his companionship, for his protection, for choosing her all those years ago when she had freed him from the trap. She buried him on a ridge overlooking the Okmulgee River, in a spot where the morning sun broke through the cypress trees just right. She marked the grave with stones and carved a Cherokee blessing into a piece of wood, planted it like a marker. Here lies a warrior who fought for the free. The swamp felt different without Tahu, quieter, more dangerous somehow, without his protection. But Aiyana continued her work. She was older now, slower, but no less determined. She had become the swamp in a way, ancient, mysterious, deadly to those who meant harm, nurturing to those seeking shelter. The years continued to pass. 1851, 1852, 1853. The nation was tearing itself apart over the question of slavery, moving inexorably toward war. But in the swamps of Georgia, Aiyana continued to help fugitives, continued to fight in the only way she knew how, one person at a time, one act of defiance at a time. She knew she was getting old, knew her body couldn't do this forever. There were nights when her joints ached so badly she could barely move, mornings when she woke up and forgot, briefly, why she was in the swamp at all. But then she would hear a sound, a splash, a footstep, the distant baying of tracking dogs, and she would remember. She would remember Sarah and Isaiah and baby Aiyana and all the others. She would remember that the earth did not forget who bled upon it, and neither did she. On a night in October 1853, 9 years after she had pulled Isaiah from the river, Aiyana sat by a fire in her cave and felt, for the first time, truly tired. Not physically tired, but soul tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from carrying purpose for too long. She had just helped 3 more people reach safety, a family, parents, and a teenage son. They had been grateful, had asked her to come north with them. She had declined, as always. This was her place. She belonged here. But sitting alone by the fire, she wondered, was this enough? Had she done enough? Had her resistance mattered in the face of a system so vast, so entrenched, so willing to defend itself with violence? She thought about the burned cabin, about Redemption Hill's flames, about Reed's face and Whitmore's terror. She thought about Hannah's baby, born free, carrying her name. She thought about the hundreds, maybe thousands by now, of people who had heard her story and taken courage from it, who had run because they heard that running was possible, who had fought because they learned that fighting was worthwhile. The earth does not forget who bled upon it. She had bled here, so had her mother, her people, Sarah and countless others. But she had also chosen here, had fought here, had mattered here. She had turned her pain into purpose, her loss into action. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all anyone could do, choose who they would be in response to the world's cruelty, and then be that person with every ounce of strength they possessed. She fell asleep by the fire, wrapped in a blanket she'd woven herself, and dreamed of her grandmother, of her mother, of Tahu. She dreamed of a place where the Trail of Tears had never happened, where Sarah lived and held her child, where freedom was not something that had to be taken, but was simply given, as natural as breathing. When she woke in the morning, if she woke in the morning, she would continue. She would help whoever needed help. She would fight until she couldn't fight anymore, because the earth remembered, and so did she. And in the swamps of Georgia, that was enough to be legend.